What's up, guys? So recently I did a video where I was talking about this idea of a pre-tap, and a bunch of you guys got really angry at me. This is one of the very first videos where I got on and I was looking at the comments and I was like, yikes, they're angry. And you know, when I went back and watched the video, to be honest, I was like, I did a pretty piss poor job of really explaining the idea and my philosophy on using submissions and training with submissions in the gym. And so I figured what I would do is talk about the philosophy, talk about the idea of the pre-tap, why I think it's important and why it was useful to me and why it was done to me when I was a white belt, and also answer some of the replies or reply back to some of your replies through the video to chat about this idea. So let's talk about it, this idea. So in the previous video, I'll give you a quick recap. If you want to watch it, it's down in the comments below or the description box below. But where this video came from was I got a message from a white belt who said he was training with a purple belt who told him he was tapping too early and sort of extended the locks a little bit past the point where he was comfortable with. Now, he sent me a message and I kind of replied back to him asking if he was injured. He said he wasn't. And so I told him what I thought was going on, right? Because you got to remember, I'm working with a limited amount of information. I don't have both sides of the story, and I'm trying to piece together what someone's experiencing based upon what I've experienced in the past and what I tend to think is more normal than not, right? And I tend to think that people are not trying to injure people, so I figured the higher belt was trying to help him in a way. And back when I was a white belt, there was an incident that happened where, when I was a white belt, let's kind of go back a little bit, I used to have a knack for tapping out due to pressure and early submissions. What I mean by this is, you know, if I was on top and everything, I was fine. But as soon as someone had me on, you know, the bottom of side control, the bottom of mount and back mount, I would a lot of times tap out to pressure. And if someone was in back mount and they just slid the arm under the neck, not even a full choke, but barely under the neck, if my arm got pulled away from my body, not even a full submission, just pulled away from the body, I would tap like that. And I remember one time my coach got frustrated with me, and we were rolling, and I was in the bottom of mount, and I was panicking and tapping, and he said, no, you can't tap, you got to keep going. Because what was happening was I was a lot of times tapping because I was either panic breathing and then went into this sort of hyperventilation and got freaked out and panicked, and I would just tap due to that. And then also, if we're being honest, there was a side of me that was like, you know, if I tap, then I get out of this uncomfortable situation. I get to reset back to neutral, which is kind of fun. So I would tap out. And so he was like, no. You got in here because you wanted to fight MMA. You can't tap out to pressure in a fight. You compete, which I did, right? Can't tap out to that. And all of us back in the day got into jiu-jitsu for at least some form of fighting or self-defense purposes. And you can't like tap out from someone squeezing you in a fight. You just have to keep going. And so he made me fight through the position. And eventually he got me in a fully locked submission and then allowed me to tap out. And it was fine. Again, I was never in any danger of being hurt or injured. What he was doing was the job of a coach, which is sometimes to pull people into uncomfortable places to help them become comfortable with those uncomfortable situations, right? That's his job, and it helped me out a lot, and I'm glad that he did it. I've done the same thing with numerous students that I've had over the years, where some of them would tap out as soon as they got put in a bad position because they wanted to get back on to a neutral position where maybe they could turn the tide and be in a better spot, just like I did. And sometimes they tap out, like, let's say, for instance, they're caught in an arm bar. As soon as the person's barely tugging on their arm, like, and they're still defending, they'll just tap out. And they're not injured or anything like that. They are either scared or nervous or panicky. And so within that reason, they need to learn how to fight a little bit longer than that and understand that there's still some fight left in them. Okay, and so that's the idea when I'm talking about pre-tapping, is basically giving up way too early when there's still some time to actually fight. Now, the comments that I got were, I'm not sure that you guys understand the way that I train, so this is kind of where we're going to get into the philosophy part. When I train, I will never train with my training partners to pop anything, right? I've never popped anyone's anything before with a submission. We've had freak accidents before, but never like, I've never had a heel hook and ripped it. I've never had someone's arm and just popped it. I've never done anything like that. Also, I've never had any of my training partners do that either, right? Because again, most of us understand that on some level we understand this, whether it's we've expressed it verbally, like I'm going to do in this video, or on you just deep down you have an understanding of this, right? Intuitively, which is, for me and the guys that I train with, the health and safety of my training partner and myself is priority, right? It takes the top over top of my performance, meaning my ability to submit them or win the roll, right? their health and safety is far more important. That shifts a little bit when we get into competitions and fights, but in the gym, I take care of my training partners well and above more than me just trying to win, right? And I'll never take anybody's arm and rip it back. And that's how you should train with submissions, I believe. That's my philosophy anyway, because if you're worried about someone ripping your heel off or whatever, maybe there's a time and place for it. It's a dangerous atmosphere, right? And if you're constantly worried about getting your ankle popped really bad without having time to tap, I think that's a bad thing. And so within the context of what I was talking about pre-tapping, I'm also talking about the fact that I'm not worried about my training partner trying to break my arm, right? So again, keep that in mind with what I was talking about. But that's kind of where I was coming from with the video about the idea of tapping too early, because it was a useful lesson to me, and it's been a useful lesson to my students. And also when I train with submissions, I'm not training to break anybody's anything. And everybody who's trained will know if you put someone in a Kimura, you can feel when the joint gets tight most of the time. If someone begins to extend an arm, you can feel when the arm is locked. If I get a heel hook and I get really tight around that leg, that's where I stop. I get to this catching point where everything's nice and tight, and then I stop. I mean, it's like back in the day, people would say that leg locks are dangerous because you cannot feel the leg lock until there's damage done. But likewise, I don't wait till my arm starts popping to tap, right? I tap out once it's fully locked out. I don't wait till I'm going to sleep to tap, like I tap out before the choke. I mean, I've never even been put asleep all the way. I've been really close a couple times, like to the point where I'm down on the ground and I'm kind of like wobbly, but I've never been like completely snoring where someone has to wake me up and stuff like that. So I've always been a quick tapper, and my body is better because of this, because I've trained with a lot of guys over the years who would stubbornly eat submissions at the in range of things, and they wouldn't tap at the right time, and they would get stuff popped, and it didn't seem like a big deal when they were younger, but then as they got older, their joints had all this damage to them, and then they had limited range of motion in their arms. They had to have surgery to clear that stuff up. And so keep that in mind with anything that I say related to submissions. That philosophy of, that right there is sort of over top of it. Now let's read a couple of your comments and then I'll reply back to them. So one came from Ray. He says, Chewy, this is not a good advice. I agree 100% that a lot of people will end up getting injured. So I could understand why you would think that before this video, right? But again, I've done this idea of getting rid of this pre-tapping, like not tapping too early with my students. And I've been a coach for over a decade, teaching people all the time. Never had a problem with it. Never had anybody get injured from this kind of stuff. Again, we have accidents that happen most of the time from just freak situations, but I've never had anybody get their stuff just ripped apart because of this. Because again, we're all training with the thing in mind that we want to push ourselves, but we also want to take care of our training partners. So again, if you combine those two things together, you don't have to worry about it as much. So again, we haven't really had a whole lot of issues at it, but again, I don't know that everybody trains like I do. So again, maybe that's my assumption. The other one says, I'm coming back from an injury, Chewy, and I plan to pre-tap on the elbow until I feel 100% good to go. And you should. That is a great idea. Again, I'm not saying, that video is not saying that you should never tap out or anything like that. Nothing far from it. It's basically like, if the arm's here, you can fight. If your arms are still defending, you got some fight left in you. That was the idea. But if you've got an injured part of your body, you should absolutely be aware of it. Like, for instance, this morning I rolled with one of my black belts, Jeff. And Jeff is a hell of a roll. He's a great roll, but Jeff's got a rib injury, right? And so what we've been doing is kind of rolling a little bit slower and purposely not putting certain pressure in places. So this way we're not re-aggravating that injury, but allowing him to roll a little bit. I had another guy, Gary, who he had an old baseball injury, right, from throwing and pitching, and it was to his elbow, and he kept injuring the damn thing. And so one day I came up to him, and he's a nice guy, and he doesn't want to act like a wimp and say, oh man, he's saying I'm fine, don't bring attention to it. But I came up and duct taped his arm with white tape, so this way everybody could see the white duct tape. And I said, guys, listen, that's Gary's hurt arm. Don't touch it, leave it alone, right? And so again, I agree with that 100%. And a lot of times when I'm rolling with people, if I've got a particular body part injured, I tap super early, super quick. So again, if you have something like that, you should absolutely tap early. That makes complete sense. Let's see, here's another one here. It says, how about whenever someone pre-taps, we just assume their fingers got stuck in the gi, boom, problem solved. If you break a surgeon's finger, you deserve to allow him to break the same fingers on you. I think that's a weird thing because injuries happen all the time. One time I shot him for a takedown and a guy broke my nose with his knee. He didn't mean to, but that doesn't give me the right to break his right? There's an idea with that situation though, where let's say your finger gets caught in the gi, rash guard, shorts, Or even if you're in a weird spot where you feel like your body's kind of contorted, where maybe an injury is possible, it's a great thing to say, hey, hold on a second, tap, 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 or give me just a moment, I'm gonna adjust right there. Okay, let's go. I mean, I did this several times this morning where all of a sudden we were caught for a second, and I was like, hold on 1 second. And I would move my body just a little bit. All right, cool, ready, go. And then we would start going again, right? That's, of course, the thing. And I mean, maybe this is the moral of this whole story, is learn to communicate with your training partners. Like the white belt, what I probably should included in the video is obviously talk to that purple belt that you were training with, right? And if any of you guys ever train with someone, you should always communicate with your training partners. I mean, for instance, with a submission, like this happened this morning, I was trying a modified version of a Peruvian necktie, and I did it to one of my students, and I was choking them, and I sat back on it, and I'm not very good with the Peruvian. It's a move that I'm kind of playing around with right now, along with some other guillotine chokes and stuff. And so when I got it, after he tapped it, I asked him, I said, was that a crank or a choke? He said, no, it was a choke. I was like, okay, cool. And then I do that a lot of times where I'll go for different submissions, and as I'm filling them out, if they're not tapping as soon as I would like them to, or if I am not quite sure about the feeling of the move, I'll loosen up a little bit and actually say, hey man, is this submitting you, or is this actually working? Or, they can tell me it's a little bit more of a crank, or I don't feel it quite here. They can give me feedback. And so of course you should communicate with your training partners 100%. And if you ever feel like anything's in danger of being injured, it doesn't matter if it's a submission or if it's not, you should 100% tap or alert your training partner to that particular area so they can stop for a second. 100%. That makes complete sense. And the last one says, the tap is sacred and should never be violated. I agree with you. If someone taps, you should let go 100%. 100%. But from the context, again, if you are a higher belt, maybe a coach or assistant coach, and you're working with someone that's new, if for some reason you see them tapping way too early and they have some fight left in them, that's where I was going with it in that last video, where I was like, this is probably what's going on. But of course, if someone submits, you should always let go. That's kind of our way to stop for a second, right? And you never know why they're tapping. It could be all sorts of different reasons that, they could have pulled a muscle in their neck that you cannot see, or there's no submission associated with it, but they tap to get you to let go. So again, that makes complete sense. But at the same time, there's some education to be done sometimes where people, especially new people, are learning their boundaries of, where am I really caught? And again, I would tell new people this, it's a wise idea to tap early, often early on. But if you ever have a higher belt that works with you and they're trying to get you to play a little bit longer or to push it a little bit longer, that's why they're doing it, because there's typically a lot more fight left in the submission than what you think often early on. Now, the one thing I will say, sort of a caveat to all this, is if you're rolling with someone that's newer, I would tap out way earlier than just tap early. It's a smart idea. Even like now, like I roll with a lot of my white belts, and when they get me in a submission, I'm very resistant. Like I'll let them get me a submission to see if they're doing it right. Like maybe we went over an armbar last week. I'll see, okay, let's see if they can do that armbar that we showed last week. And when they go for it, I'll make sure that it's a good one, right? I'll make sure it's good. But then when they're going, I'm tapping pretty early because I don't know that they have the control. Whereas if I go with one of my purple belts, brown belts, black belts, I know that I'm safe. And so again, they're going to apply it with great technique. And so I have a little bit more time to work. And likewise, they can do the same with me. And so again, that's another thing to include. But I just wanted to talk a little bit more about that philosophy because like I said, I did a piss poor job of explaining it in the first video. And I wanted to go deeper with it because I don't want you guys to think I'm telling you to like let your arm pop and then you keep fighting. That's not what I was talking about. And I never trained to those extents anyway. So that's, for me, it's not even on the table. Risking injury to win a roll is never on the table. But understanding the boundaries of when something is actually caught versus it's not, that is something that I work towards. And that's something that I get my students to work towards, because I don't want my students to be like me when I was a white belt, when I would just give up as soon as someone was barely under the neck, or when my arm was still caught, or when I just had simply pressure across me and I was uncomfortable and I gave up. So that's where the video came from. That's where it was coming from in my experience. And that's what I was trying to convey in that video. But as sometimes happens, right? And so that's why when you watch my videos, you have to consider it like almost like a big body of work, and you have to think about everything that's coming in, because it's not simply just one thing. Because again, I'm already on 14 minutes here. It's a long video. And trying to sometimes get these points across in a nice, quick, snappy fashion, sometimes it leads to miscommunication. So just wanted to share that with you guys, because I know a lot of you guys follow me, and I don't want you to think that I'm telling you to like let your arms snap, your heels snap, and keep going, because that's something I've never done and would never tell anyone to do. But if you ever roll with a higher belt, let's say if you're a newer person, you ever roll with a higher belt and they start to tell you to not pre-tap or to keep fighting a little bit and you feel uncomfortable, that's probably why they're doing it. They're probably trying to get you into a little bit more of this uncomfortable territory, but it's territory that's still safe and not fully locked in yet. So just an idea to share with you guys, and I'll talk to you next time.